We're just waiting for one or two people to come in at the back, and as we expected, this is a very full session. It's actually one of three sessions today that is specifically on the Middle East. Following this session, there will be a session specifically on Gaza. I think the Secretary General of the Arab League and the Secretary General of the UN, the Prime Minister of Turkey and others will be engaged in a discussion of that. What we are going to do is to try and look at the broader Middle East, some of the issues concerned there, and get a range of opinions from the Foreign Minister of Turkey, from the Foreign Minister of Iraq, from the Foreign Minister of Iran, and also from Abdul, who's a businessman actually inside the Palestinian territory, who can in a sense give us the view from inside Palestine, and who's somebody I know well and know from my experience of him has tried to play an immensely constructive role in building the possibilities of a Palestinian state. So we're going to, as it were, go a little broader than merely the recent issues and events in Gaza and the questions to do with Palestine, but obviously we will touch on those as well. And then following this panel discussion, there is going to be a later discussion with the people I've said that will specifically focus on Gaza itself. And I am the moderator of this session, so I will restrict myself in offering my own views unless I feel extraordinarily compelled and motivated, which may happen at any moment. But for the moment, I will be try to be a proper chairman and proper moderator. And I'd like, if I might, to begin with the Foreign Minister of Turkey. Turkey has played an important role in recent developments in the Middle East, not least to do with the discussions between Israel and Syria, but also more broadly than that. Prime Minister Erdogan has been very active, both in respect of recent events in Gaza and elsewhere, but also more generally in the Middle East peace process. So I will hand over to you, first of all, Foreign Minister Babacan, and thank you very much indeed for coming here. And as I say, if you can give us your sense of maybe what you're expecting from the new American administration in the US, and then specifically something about how you see the prospects in respect of Syria. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, the year of 2008 for Middle East was full of series of events which gave us all hope. Hope for peace, hope for settlements, and also gave us hope that things could get maybe into the right direction. What happened? First of all, Annapolis process started, process between Israel and Palestine. Many countries went there, started a new Israel-Palestine peace process, and we were all hopeful. And then peace talks between Israel and Syria started. Turkey was the sole mediator for those talks. We were hopeful. The crisis in Lebanon was solved at least until the elections of this year. There is now a new president in Lebanon. Also, for Iran's nuclear program, a new set of negotiations started between the 6 countries, P5+1 and Iran. There was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, started in June, lasted until December. There was also work of Egypt for reconciliation between the Palestinians. So all these were, in a way, good things that made us hopeful. But then, when the year of 2009 was approaching, when we get closer and closer to 2009, we had worries, and we shared our worries within different circles. Why? Because the presidential elections in Palestine was due 9th of January. Then the elections in Israel coming up for 10th of February. Then elections in Iraq coming up, end of this month for local elections, some part of local elections, then more to come middle of this year, and then general elections towards the end of this year. Elections in Iran in June coming up, elections in Lebanon coming up. And all those events, in a way, were important because if these were handled in the right way, things could roll on in a very positive way. And 2009 could be a year of success for the Middle East. But then, if we start in the wrong way, so to say, if all these important events turn out to be sources of crisis or crisis themselves, then, of course, we have reasons to be worried about. And an important element to this whole picture, elections in the US and the new administration which started its work 20th of January. The United States, as a country which is influential in the region, the policies matter a lot. And how the new administration will approach to the issues of this region is going to be very crucial. So far, President Obama, when he made his election campaign and when we look at what he said after getting into the office, actually, we have lots of reasons to be hopeful. Because we, as Turkey, believe that the problems of the Middle East can only be resolved through political dialogue. There is no military solution to any problem in the Middle East. And multilateralism, dialogue, seems to be the main theme of the new administration. And if the new administration really listens to everybody, gets all the views, do wide consultations, and takes the appropriate steps, I think there can be results, positive results in the region. And as Turkey, we are a country talking with all the Arab countries very easily. We are talking to Israel. We have good relations with our neighbor Iran. We are talking with all the Palestinian groups, including Hamas. And we are using these channels of communication, this ability of having dialogue to facilitate peace, to have a conducive environment to get positive results. That's what we have tried to do all throughout the Gaza events. That's what we are still trying to do. We are doing that in Iraq, talking with all the groups of Iraq to have all these elections a success in a way. In Lebanon, for example, when the new president was elected by the parliament, there were only two prime ministers in the parliament who were invited for the ceremony, the Prime Minister of Qatar and Prime Minister of Turkey, because we were very silent but very effective in terms of settling down the differences. So we will continue our role, I would say. We are a member of NATO, a country in the process of European Union accession also, gives us, I think, also an important place talking about democracy, fundamental rights and freedoms, rule of law, and dialogue as the main means to resolve problems.
And in a word, do you think it is possible, from the contacts you've had between Israel and Syria, is it possible to construct a basis upon which they could enter into negotiation?
Well, actually, they were already negotiating. We had 4 rounds of indirect talks.
Yeah, but and I mean actually lead it to the next stage of being able to
direct talks. We were very close just before the Gaza events, I would say. Prime Minister Olmert was in Turkey just 5 days before the Gaza events started. And we had almost a 5th round during those meetings. My Prime Minister was on the phone with President Assad of Syria, and Prime Minister Olmert was in Ankara, two separate rooms, I would say. And we were getting really close. And I think both sides were quite hopeful and with strong will. But of course, the situation in Gaza, unfortunately, now makes it quite difficult to proceed. Only after things settle and when the two countries really feel ready, maybe that process can be resumed. But also, we don't think that the peace processes in the Middle East should be handled in a sequential way. So Israel-Palestine track, Israel-Syria track, and Israel-Lebanon track. These could start at the same time in a parallel way. Because
right, so you don't believe that you choose the Syria track over the Palestinian track, you have to pursue them simultaneously?
We strongly believe that we could proceed in parallel processes, because positive movement in one track helps the other track. The issues are actually not totally isolated issues. There are actually probably very similar or identical principles which you can apply to solve the problems in all the tracks. And we have actually high hopes that that can actually happen. Once the situation in Gaza is settled, once there's a permanent ceasefire, once there is actually a reconciliation process, a successful process among the Palestinians, the next thing which should start immediately is the peace process. Maybe not start, but I should say resume. Because there is already a process between Israel and Palestine. There is already a process between Israel and Syria. So we believe that it can resume.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, sir. If I could turn to Foreign Minister Zebari, you were at the recent summit in Kuwait, and obviously Iraq has its own issues to do with stability and so on. Can you give us a sense both of the internal situation, but also how you perceive the impact of that recent Arab summit and what the possibilities coming out of it are for the Arab peace initiative to be put back on track?
Well, on the Iraqi situation, the situation has improved a great deal. And all the facts, all the figures, all the indications show a dramatic decline in violence and terrorism and attacks. And also the Iraqi government is doing a better job. In fact, there is more confidence by the Iraqi people in the government, in the policies. And only this year, in fact, Iraq is holding 3 elections. It's one soon in the end of January for local elections, a provincial election. In summer, we'll have another district elections or maybe a referendum on the security agreement with the United States. And then at the end of the year, we'll have a general election for electing a new government. So this process, this democratization is working in Iraq. In fact, and the people, the great majority, have supported it. The government is more inclusive, and people have high hope that the situation has started to change. And accordingly, Iraq is playing a greater role in regional and Arab politics as well, as we've seen recently in the Arab Summit. Iraq's role, voice was very, very important, in fact, in many events. The message that came out from the Arab Summit, and this was unanimous, that the Arab Peace Initiative that was proposed in 2002 cannot be on the table forever. I mean, unless the other side will consider it, will take it seriously. Really, there hasn't been much advancement or responsiveness from the other side. And there is a great deal of frustration we felt to see there about the lack of progress and the dramatic events in Gaza, all the killings of these people, and also the inability to find a durable solution. This lasted for almost 3 weeks with all the suffering. That left a very bad taste, I think, in everybody's mouth. But people are also very hopeful, actually. I think the new administration have given some very positive and encouraging statements toward respect for the Arab Islamic world, for instance, the appointment of Senator Mitchell as another move, let's say, by the new administration to show seriousness, and also the message that this administration is going to listen. I mean, not to impose certain views ahead of these talks. So there is a real possibility, in fact. I mean, we cannot underestimate the challenges, because this is a new administration, and it could be challenged by the extremists, by those groups who really want to scuttle the whole process. But the 2009 is seen as a year of optimism. There is an air of optimism. So we hope together, and with your good efforts also, Prime Minister, we hope that something could be materialized.
Do you, I mean, just from a sense of not just an Iraqi perspective, but a broader Arab perspective, how important is resolving the Palestine question? How important is that to the whole of the region and even to the politics in Iraq?
Well, it has a connection. It has a linkage, definitely. I mean, the root causes of all this problem is the Arab-Israeli or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that has been ongoing, actually. It has impact, it has influences, because it breeds extremism, it breeds violence, it breeds people really who resort to jihadist ideology to settle their own scores and so on. And we in Iraq have suffered from that. So really, I think some progress and movement on the Arab-Israeli track would help other issues as well, and calm down passion and tension, And there is an opportunity. The possibility of a two viable state is still a possibility. I think many people support that. So there is an opportunity. I hope this opportunity will be exploited to the limit.
Thank you, Foreign Minister. Foreign Minister Mottaki of Iran, if I can turn to you. The American administration, President Obama, has said that he wants to engage with Iran. And that engagement will mean, obviously, there is a very direct sense of dialogue. I think what interests a lot of people, certainly the West, but actually in the Middle East region, is once we get down to that dialogue, what will people actually say? And obviously there are issues to do with Iran and nuclear capability and so on. And I know those were discussed at an earlier conference. I don't want to ask you about that, but I would like to ask you this: if we get a viable and reinvigorated process towards a two-state solution, a state of Israel, a state of Palestine, is that a concept that Iran is prepared to accept? In other words, if the Palestinian people and the Israeli people can negotiate a peace with the support of the international community, would Iran want to support such a process?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. تشکر میکنم از دعوتم به این پنل بسیار مهم و موضوعی که مطرحه و همینطور سوالی که جناب آقای بلر مطرح کردن. امریکا و کشورهای منطقه ما موضوعات مختلفی وجود داره که طرفین رو متأثر میکنه. توجه به این موضوعات اهمیت داره و مهمتر داشتن یک صورت واقعی از این مسائل. خاورمیانه یکی از اون موضوعات بسیار مهمه. امروز هر کشوری اگر بخواد بگه که من در حوزه بین المللی فعال هستم، باید نسبت به خاورمیانه تصویر داشته باشه، شناخت داشته باشه و نظر داشته باشه. اگر در دیپلماسی عملی هم حضور داشته باشه، اون وقت میگن این کشور یک کشور فعال در حوزه سیاست‌های بین المللی است. من فکر می‌کنم آقای بلر، دوستان عزیز، ما یه جمله رو قبول داریم که شناخت بیماری 50% درمان هست و همه اذعان داریم که 60 سال این بیماری در منطقه خاورمیانه وجود داره. آیا واقعاً این بیماری رو میشناسیم؟ پاسخ من به این سوال مثبت نیست. شناخت جامع و درست نسبت به صورت مسئله در خاورمیانه نیست. دلیل من خیلی واضح و روشنه. ما 60 سال رو پشت سر گذاشتیم از موضوعی که همه از اون به عنوان یک بحران اسم میبرن. بحران فلسطین، بحران خاورمیانه. در طول این 60 سال و به ویژه در 3 دهه گذشته بیش از 100 طرح، ابتکار، قطعنامه و ایده های مختلف برای حل این مشکل ارائه شده. سوال من این هست: چرا این مسئله حل نشده؟ چرا این مشکل حل نشد؟ ممکنه کسی 30 سال مراجعه به پزشک و بیمارستان داشته باشه اما بیماری او رفع نشه و یک پزشک دیگری، یک کس دیگری میاد بررسی میکنه، میگه اصلا بیماری این بیمار تشخیص داده نشده. من فکر میکنم آقای بلر، خیلی ها در خاورمیانه وارد پروسه های مسائل فلسطین شدن. خود آقای بلر رو ببینید، موهاشون سفید شده بعد از نخست وزیری، اینقدر موهاشون سفید نبود و این نشون میده که موضوع خاورمیانه موضوع بسیار مهمی است، بسیار اثرگذاری است و لذا ما فکر میکنیم به مسئله خاورمیانه و مسئله فلسطین باید جامع الاطراف نگاه کرد. با چنین نگاهی من به 50% سوال آقای بلر جواب میدم و اون این هست که ما از دولت فلسطین حتما حمایت میکنیم و چرا که سرزمینشون هست، کشورشون هست. اگر به لایه‌های درونی این بحران بخوایم نگاه بکنیم، اون وقت من به شما عرض میکنم که با توجه به تجارب پیشین، خصوصا همین تجربه 1 سال آخر دولت آقای بوش رو در نظر بگیرید، در آناپولیس جمع شدند، آقای بوش اشاره کردند 2008 ما مسئله فلسطین رو تمام میکنیم. من جلوتر میرم، 1991 من معاون بین الملل وزارت خارجه بودم. بعد از مذاکرات مادرید طرح اسلو مطرح شد. وقتی که با دوستانم در ریاض در عربستان گفتگو میکردیم که چه خواهد شد مسئله خاورمیانه، اشاره کردند که حل خواهد شد در این دور جدید، ولی 5 سال طول میکشه تا کل مسئله فلسطین حل بشه. عزیزان، ما 4مین 5 سال رو وارد شدیم، چرا حل نشده؟ گمان میکنم باید ریشه‌ای تر، اساسی تر ورود کنیم. اما آنچه به امریکا برمیگرده به عنوان بخشی از مشکل در خاورمیانه، سیاست‌های یکسونیگرانه، یک جانبه گرایانه، سیاست‌های ترغیبی استفاده از زور، سیاست‌های حمایتی یک جانبه و حمایت از همه جنایاتی که در طول این سالیان طولانی در منطقه صورت گرفته. 2 سال پیش در لبنان، اخیراً در غزه چه حادثه اتفاق افتاده؟ هدف چی بود؟ هدف رویکرد همیشگی که یک رژیم اشغالگر در منطقه ما که ریشه همه ناآرامی هاست ایجاد کرده و دولت‌های پیشین امریکا اعم از دموکرات و جمهوری‌خواه حمایت کردند از این یکسونیگری و یک جانبه نگری. ما دقیقاً رصد می‌کنیم سیاست‌های جدید دولت امریکا رو. محور تغییره. ما می‌خوایم ببینیم آقای اوباما چه تفاوت‌های قائل است بین سیاست‌هاش در خاورمیانه با پیشینیان. مردم به تغییر در ادبیات نگاه می‌کنند اما قضاوت نمی‌کنند. مردم عملکرده ها رو مبنا قرار میدن. عذرخواهی می‌کنم.
Right. Just before, I mean, I've actually not got totally grey hair. I just like to make that clear, but just so that I don't lose the remaining hairs that aren't grey, could just help me with this one thing, though, because I think this is at the heart of the issue. I mean, I understand why you say there were unilateral policies that were wrong. I understand why you say there were a whole set of initiatives that have been put forward and failed. But just as a concept, as a vision, do you accept that the answer to peace in the Middle East does lie in actually the multilateral approach, which is 2 states, 1 state of Palestine and 1 state of Israel? Because if people, I think, heard you say, yes, I accept in principle 2 states, then argue about how you designate them or decide the territory. But if people heard you say, we accept in principle 2 states, I think it would keep my hair brown.
البته امروز نگهداری مو راحت شده، خیلی سخت نیست، نگران نباشید. اما آقای جناب آقای بلر از من سیاستمدارترند و سابقه سیاسی ایشون از من بیشتره. چند سوال رو در یک سوال مطرح کردن، ولی من اجازه میخوام به این سوالات جدا جدا جواب بدم. ایشون پرسیدن آیا به صلح در خاورمیانه اعتقاد دارید؟ قطعاً پاسخ این سوال مثبته. ما صلحی عادلانه بر اساس حق رو نه برای خاورمیانه، برای همه جهان باور داریم، اعتقاد داریم. ما از شلیک اولین گلوله رژیم صدام علیه کشورمون به دنبال صلح بودیم. بنابراین در صلح ما این اعتقاد رو داریم. اما من معتقدم از سوی فلسطینیان و از سوی هر ملت دیگری ما مجاز به تصمیم سازی نیستیم. در لابلای برخی از ایده ها، طرح‌ها و ابتکارات مطرح شده برای فلسطین، بازگشت فلسطینیان مطرحه. میلیون ها فلسطینی در خارج از خانه و سرزمینشون زندگی می‌کنند. چرا اینها نباید به سرزمینشون برگردند؟ بگذارید کار را از جای درست شروع کنیم. در چنان فضایی ما معتقدیم هر کشوری، هر سرزمینی صاحبان اصلی خودش رو داره. اگرچه مهمانانی هم ممکنه با اون کشور وارد شده باشند، اگرچه پناهندگانی، اگرچه پوش داده شدگانی در اون سرزمین وجود داشته باشند، اما هر سرزمین صاحبان اصلی خودش رو داره. ما معتقدیم فلسطین ساکنینی اعم از مسلمان، یهودی و مسیحی داره که اینها صاحبان اصلی من مجاز نیستم از سوی این مردم پاسخ بدم. اجازه بدید از خودشون بپرسیم. بر این اساس جمهوری اسلامی معتقد است که در یک رفراندوم و همه پرسی شفاف، صریح، تحت نظر سازمان‌های بین‌المللی، ما می‌توانیم پاسخ سوالی رو که آقای بلر از بنده کرده پیدا بکنیم. ما طرحی رو در این زمینه آماده کردیم که قلب اون و روح اون همین است. در واقع و در کلام دیگر عدم دخالت در مسائل داخلی فلسطین است. ما با مجموعه‌های مختلف فلسطینی، با برخی از کشورهای منطقه، با دبیرکل سازمان ملل، با کشورهای مختلف در شروع داریم می‌کنیم یک رایزنی رو و نظرخواهی رو و معتقدیم برای فلسطین، فلسطینیان باید تصمیم بگیرن در یک اجماع و همه فلسطین.
Well, that is a wonderful introduction to Abdul, who is indeed a Palestinian. And Abdul, if you can, I mean, actually, it's interesting just to pick up on what's been said and give us your reflection on what you think Palestinian people really do want in this situation, and how you see the possibility of getting back near to achieving it.
Thank you. First, I think it's very uncommon for a businessman to be on a panel with 3 foreign ministers and an ex-prime minister. I hope it will be a habit for WIF, because I am replacing our prime minister. So there were supposed to be 5 politicians around this table. Because I think the private sector looks at the whole thing from a different angle, from the practical angle. And just listening to the discussion we had around this table until now, you understand why the conflict is not being solved. Because it's been handled by politicians. Honestly, I will answer a lot of the things that have been mentioned, but I'll just mention quickly. Last year, I was invited to the breakfast of Shimon Peres here in Davos. And I told Mr. Peres 2 things. I said, if I sit with, there's an Israeli businessman called Idan Ofer. He's a well-known Israeli businessman. He said, if we sit, we can solve it in 3 minutes. We can sign a peace agreement in 2 minutes. And I told him, if I'm to be the president of Palestine, and I promise you I will not be, I will do the following. The first decree I will sign is I'll appoint, at that time, 3 names came to my mind. I'll appoint me, the President of Palestine, which I will not be. I'll appoint the 3 following names as the chief negotiators. Okay, Saib will be very upset and Abu Ala will be very upset, but I'll appoint 3 chief negotiators on behalf of Palestine. I'll appoint Idan Ofer, Yosef Vardi, and Dov Lautman. These are 3 Israelis. And I'll say, go, you have carte blanche. I'll accept any agreement you will bring back. And I told Mr. Peres, you know what? I'll tell you what will happen. They will come back empty-handed. Now, that, I think, tells you where's the real problem. And that does not excuse the Palestinians from their responsibility. Vis-a-vis the 2-state solution, let me tell my dear brother, the Foreign Minister of Iran, what Khalid Mish'al just said in Qatar only 10 days ago. He said Hamas accepts the 2-state solution based on the borders of June 1967, and he said clearly Hamas accepts the Arab Peace Initiative. So this issue is behind us. When Khalid Mish'al, the head of Hamas, makes such a statement in a summit in Qatar, and the president of Iran was there, and from Turkey, and everybody was there. I mean, you can go back and listen to what Mish'al said. So I think the issue of 2-state solution, if this is still acceptable by Israel, not by the Palestinian side. Now the issue of Hamas, because this keeps coming up. I think Hamas, and you know that I don't support Hamas, you know I'm not from Hamas, but Hamas did win a democratic elections. I find it kind of strange, on this table we have 2 foreign ministers from 2 Islamic countries, 2 Islamic parties. Rafah in Turkey is an Islamic party, Iran is an Islamic government. But it's okay. It's okay to have 2 governments ruled by Islamic parties. When Hamas won elections, and I was not supportive of that victory, I think it was a mistake. I think Hamas would not have been able to deliver and to run the affairs of the Palestinians. What happened? They were banished. They were prevented from exercising their right of forming government. I met Ismail Haniyeh, immediately after he was elected. And I asked him for one thing: please don't form the government. Because realities on the ground will not enable Hamas to perform and to run the lives of the Palestinians. The conclusion from the war in Gaza is very simple. And the siege and the closure on Gaza for the last 3 years is very simple. Elimination through closure or siege or through missiles and war will not solve the problem. Hamas will not go away, will not disappear. I think inclusion and reconciliation and unity is the way out. And I think there is a role that Iran, I want Iran to get involved. I mean, the Foreign Minister is saying that Iran is not involved. I'm not sure, but I would love Iran to be involved. I would like Turkey to be involved, but in one direction, to bring Palestinians together, to pressure the leadership. I think Turkey can play a major role in putting some reasoning to the way Hamas thinks and acts, because Turkey, they are Muslims. Nobody can question. You have a prime minister with a veiled wife and a president with a veiled wife. Nobody can question their Islam. They talk to the Israelis. They negotiate with the Israelis. There's no problem with that. So I think Turkey can play a major role in bringing some reasoning to the thinking of Hamas. I think the way out is to have a unity government in Palestine. Now, the war in Gaza has been horrible. Before coming to Davos, I went to visit Palestinian children who have been hit and injured, and they were also Israeli kids who were injured. I went to Egypt to visit these kids. And there was this boy, his name is Raed Asfour, he's 10 years old. I'm visiting him, talking to him, and I asked him, I was very much affected and emotionally touched from the scene. I asked him, Raed, what do you want to do after you recover? He said, I want to be a telecom engineer. I said, why? He said, because I want to work for your company, for Paltel. And I was amazed. This kid, I don't know how many members of his family he lost, a broken face, broken arm. He's thinking he wants to be a telecom engineer. He wants to have a job. He did not talk about revenge. He did not talk about killing Israelis, even though just 10 days ago he was under the attack of Israelis. This is the real face of Palestine. Palestinians want to live in peace. However, having said all of that, we have responsibilities. And we have to adhere and we have to respect these responsibilities of the Palestinians, and there are mistakes on the Palestinian side, I don't deny them. But we should not ignore that Israel continued building settlements in the West Bank, building major infrastructure projects in the West Bank. And ordinary Palestinians, when they see 600 checkpoints, and I advise all of you to watch, by the way, there is the 60 Minutes, Bob Simon on CBS, it was on the 25th of this month. Just watch it, it's 13 minutes, amazing. When Israel continues building settlements in the West Bank, and Mr. Blair, you know very well what I'm talking about, and more checkpoints, ordinary Palestinians have the right, business people like me have the right to ask, if Israel wants to withdraw from the West Bank, if they are genuine about withdrawing, why are they building more settlements? Why are they building these roads? Are they thinking of our future state? They want to give us this beautiful infrastructure? They want to give us these power lines and water? Of course not. That's not the case. I'll tell you another thing. I have a telecom company in Palestine. My switches sit in London, in your capital, because I'm not allowed to bring my switches to Palestine. Every single phone call that I make, a Palestinian makes, has to go to London and comes back from London. Why? Security. This whole thing of security, I think, will bring more losses in the lives of Israelis and Palestinians. I think it's about time that we challenge our politicians and we put them in the front of the realities and the obligations. No more slogans on both sides. We need real leaders. We need change. And this is the message to Mr. Obama. He talked about change. I think his exam is in the Middle East. I think the Middle East is the easiest exam for Mr. Obama. And if he fails in the Middle East, I don't think he's going to succeed in the rest of the change he's going to bring.
Abdul. The call to get rid of the politicians is always a popular one. What I find is, if you don't mind me just replying on behalf of my club, that it's always a downside, easier when you're not sitting in the seat. But nonetheless, just answer me this, Abdul, because I think this would be interesting for people here. And I know, because you and I have worked on these things in Palestine. Your appreciation of the capability of the Palestinian Authority, because I think when you were talking about weaknesses, mistakes on the Palestinian side, I think, if I can put it less tactfully than you did, there was a real worry about the capability and capacity of the Palestinian side. But just from the point of view of someone being there and living there, how has Prime Minister Fayyad sought to change that, particularly in relation to security? Because the Israelis do have a security concern. However people think this may be misapplied, they do. And obviously it's important the Palestinians have that security capability. Just, I think it might be helpful from some point of view, someone actually there, living there, to talk a bit about that.
You asked a very tough question. And now I have to be a politician to answer this question.
That's why I asked you.
Well, I think there are two faults for this question. The first part, the fact that we're living a miserable situation because of the gangs. They used to control the West Bank. And there is no security and there is no safety. I'm talking about from the angle of the Palestinian side. Put the Israelis aside for a second.
These are local militia and gangs.
Militias and gangs who used to basically attack my company and kidnap my employees and force me to pay money. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Dr. Salam Fayyad did a great job in restoring law and order in Palestine. And despite all the attempts of the Israelis to fail him, he said this is an obligation on the side of the Palestinians. And this is what I like about the approach of our Prime Minister. He looks at the obligations, his obligations, despite, regardless of what the Israelis are doing, because he says, I don't want to give them excuses. And I urge our brothers, including Iran, do not give a clear answer. Say, yes, we accept the Arab Peace Initiative. Say, yes, we accept two-state solutions, because we don't want to give the Israelis one single excuse for running away from coming and sitting around the table. Because right now, they all the time come with these excuses. But I'll tell you, if you give all the approvals, they will not come. Now, the second part, but to deprive them from this luxury of always saying Hamas is not accepting, Iran is not accepting, Saudi Arabia is not accepting. Well, you have 1 billion Arabs and Muslims accepting you. Do you accept? Give us a clear answer. The foreign minister of Iran was asked before this session about this particular issue, and he gave a long, long answer. I could not understand what was his reply. But what I'm saying, we do not want to give them the excuse. We accept, yes or no. If they accept, they should do it on the ground. The other part, which I have to mention about the security, I think there are some behaviors lately when we were witnessing the attacks on Gaza that I did not personally like. Palestinian police attacking demonstrators in Ramallah, I think that was not a smart move. I think that was a mistake. But it's a small mistake among many big achievements, so you can forget about it. One more important aspect for the progress in the West Bank is giving a free hand to the private sector in Palestine to be the leading force in the reconstruction and development and rebuilding of the whole country and building hope and creating jobs. Because I'm sure you know this, jobs in the government will never solve the economic problems in Palestine. To the contrary, it makes it much worse. I think the answer is private sector. The answer is inviting Arab private sector to come to Palestine and opening the door for Arab companies to come and invest in Palestine. I think this is the way, creating jobs, creating hope, building a real bridge towards peace and stability in the region. I think this is in the best interest of Israel before any other party in the whole Middle East.
Thanks, Abdul. I mean, just before I ask the foreign ministers to come in, I mean, it's very interesting, if I could just interject this reflection. And you say, remove from Israel any excuse, right? And in the course of the Northern Ireland negotiation, the argument that I used in the end with the Sinn Féin and the IRA people was, they would say, look, they're never going to give us peace. They're never going to give us equality, the unionists. And I used the argument, well, why don't you remove the excuse and then let's see? And actually, when they did that and removed the excuse, funnily enough, there was peace. And I think your approach is absolutely right. Deal with it. And this is really the thing I wanted to ask the foreign ministers about, because we all talk about unity, and we all talk about unity in progress towards peace. But the question I want to ask the foreign ministers, because we'll be thrown out of this room at some point reasonably soon, is my experience in politics, for there to be unity, there has to be genuine agreement. Now, is it possible to get unity without a commitment by everyone to pursue political means only peacefully?
Yes, I think I'll try to answer this. My good friend, I think, talk more politics than business, you see, so I'll come back to politics. I think a comparison of the Sinn Féin and the IRA, Mr. Prime Minister, not necessarily actually would be applicable here in our parts of the world, unfortunately. This was the case in Iraq. We discussed this many times, that sometimes you don't have many Sinn Féins, you have all IRAs. And that is the problem. The key issue, Israel has to negotiate, in fact, with the Palestinians. They are the ones who have the real interest. And they must be united. I mean, the issue of unity, there is always be excuse, definitely, for the other party to run away from that, if there is no common vision or a common commitment. And that's why one of the resolutions at the Arab Summit really was a great emphasis on Palestinian reconciliation, and that is the key. There was a great emphasis on the Egyptian initiative, try to calm down the situation, because they are, as an arbiter of this or a negotiator, a reliable partner with Israel and with the Palestinians, with Hamas. Without that, it would be extremely, extremely difficult to achieve peace and so on. Again, you need really a strong Arab solidarity and support and unity there, you have some difficulties as well, which we are all trying to help. But the issue of unity is the key, I think, and here is the onus is on our Palestinian brothers really to get their act together and to look beyond regionalism, to look beyond the self-interest or who's legitimate, who is not legitimate. If you talk about election, I've been elected, there are many elected leaders, you see, but they were not legitimate. And therefore, it is important really that both the PI, both the Hamas, and other factions should really recognize that without a unity, there wouldn't be a peace process.
Foreign Minister, Mottaki, can I just come to you on the point that Foreign Minister Zebari has just made? If the Palestinians did unify and agreed a position with Israel, would that make a difference to the Iranian position?
Palestinians include the collection of the people who are inside Palestine, living inside Palestine since the day one of the occupation of these lands, and all of those Palestinians who have been displaced and who have been displaced to other, and they are shattered to all over the world and living across the world. And they have a great number of population. They are a great number of population. We believe that a mechanism would be defined that the ideas and all of these Palestinians could be gathered, and as you mentioned, the unity and solidarity be accompanied. Certainly, it will be in line with the interest of the great nation of Palestine, and all of us should respect that.
Thank you. Foreign Minister of Turkey, I come to
وزیر محترم خارجه ترکیه، میایم سراغ شما. آخرین
I mean, Turkey has played a role in trying to bring people together. Your opening remarks were very much about how, you know, the region finds peace in the different tracks. I mean, do you actually think it's possible to find that peace unless there is a commitment by everybody that it is only through political negotiation that political means are achieved?
Well, we believe in the power of political mechanisms. So what is needed, especially for the Palestinian case? The Palestinians have to go through a political restructuring, a restructuring during which all the groups actually have their voices within the political system. The last elections, yes, was in 2006. There was a party called Change and Reform. Got 44% of the votes, more than half of the seats in the parliament. And now the speaker of that parliament and most of the members of that parliament is in jail. And how to make sure that the Palestinians actually express themselves through the political system? That is what has to be done pretty soon. Maybe after the reconciliation, after having a kind of maybe transitional government, presidential elections and parliamentary elections in Palestine is very important to actually solidify that unity so that all the Palestinians feel themselves part of the government, part of the parliament, part of the way how the Palestinians are governed. If this is not achieved, if we just ignore almost half of the Palestinian population which expressed their will in 2006, then it seems really difficult to get a sustainable solution. So, on one hand, trying to convince all the Palestinian groups is the political means. Being a political movement rather than anything else is the key. Then making sure that eventually all the will is actually going to reflect in the way how they are governed, then it is not a dream. I think it is possible to achieve this result. But on the other hand, I think the other countries in the region is also very important. Right now, unfortunately, we have seen a polarization among the Arab countries. There was a summit in Doha
which only 11 out of the 22 Arab countries showed up. There was another summit in Sharm el-Sheikh where countries who were in Doha were not represented in Sharm el-Sheikh, and the meeting in Kuwait, which had an economic nature. The Arab League summit had an economic nature, but when we look at the outcome, the political outcome, actually we didn't really see that unity as well. So if we just leave aside the military choices, military instruments, and really concentrate on what we can get through talks, through democracy in a way, then we believe that there's really a good chance. Of course, how to prepare the basis for this? Gaza is a place which is actually an open prison. There has been a blockade which has been implemented for a long time. And right now there is a talk about opening the crossings, but opening the crossings is just to let the humanitarian aid in and out. But ending the blockade is a political decision, and that has to come soon. Otherwise, we cannot punish 1.5 million people collectively for whatever reason that someone can present. Also, West Bank, there are 500 or 600 road blockages, checkpoints within West Bank. Think about a place where there are only 2.5 million people living, and in order to get from one point to another, you have to at least get checked in a way 5, 6, or maybe 10 other places. And how to revive the economy in such an area? How to bring welfare to the people living in West Bank or living in Gaza? IMF had a report about Palestine, about West Bank especially, about how to recover the economy of Palestine. And the number one finding, written in bold letters, was these checkpoints have to be reduced immediately. It is the main obstacle which is preventing the economic welfare of the Palestinians. Okay, so we understand the security issues, but that has to be the right balance. We understand the security concerns of Israel, but then if we are talking about security, security has to be provided for everyone. And only security should never be used as an excuse to continue to punish 1.5 million there, 2.5 million people there, and total of 4 million Palestinians continuously. So that has to be also addressed. I mean, in order for the democracy to function properly, in order for this political restructuring to happen properly, also these blockade checkpoints and so on, these also have to be more reasonable. So, and also security restructuring. I think how the Palestinian security subjects will be restructured, reformed in a way, is going to be also an essential part of what needs to be studied, what needs to be worked on. So political restructuring, security restructuring, and then only thinking about the political ways and dialogue to come to an end.
Well, I think that's a very sensible place to conclude our time, because I know we're out of time for the room. I mean, I just wanted to say this one final reflection. I mean, I think inside Palestine itself, both Gaza and West Bank, if there were the right capacity building on the Palestinian side, allied with then the lifting of the occupation and the blockade, because there was a genuine consensus towards peace and a two-state solution, then I think you would very quickly find the reality on the ground started to support the concept of a negotiated state. And the only other thing I'd say is this, that I think in a sense, as this panel discussion has indicated, although I think often people in Israel and people in Palestine wish that the outside engagement of the powers in the region and wider than the region, America, Europe, the other Arab nations, the nations in the wider region, I think although they often wish that engagement stroke interference was different or less, the fact is this is an issue of strategic importance actually to all of us. It may be sometimes unfortunate, particularly for Palestinians and Israelis, that that's so, but it is. And my reflection is that the new administration in America, by signaling from the beginning that it intends to grip it, treat it seriously, and work for a solution, I think at least that's a good start. And it will be up to the rest of us to try and make sure we bring it to a good finish. Thank you all very much.